Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast addendum, another state of the balance here for the month of August. A bit later than usual, my apologies. Just, a lot of things going through my head, including with the British coming up, and so it was accidentally a bit forgotten there. But here we are with it, the state of the balance August. The situation has sort of been since July. I mean, there's been some change to the meta game. For example, if you say start with the Americans, I mean, as general, the Americans sort of just tend to sort of move from thing to thing. It's sort of more how they operate, One period, it's, airborne, it's infantry, it's armor. Next, it's, rifle company. And I would sort of seem to move towards, but, it's generally a mix of all things. Rifle company, have only in July, not really seen much there, apparently, just wasn't of much interest, but now Rifle Company seems to be making a steady return, and where Captain also has sort of been dominating. I'm noticing the Lieutenant is sort of slowly creeping his way back in with the M20 and the half-track, people realizing, that Captain is a very good choice, but that doesn't necessarily make the Lieutenant a bad choice. I mean, there does seem to, if one choice is good, the other one must be bad, just perhaps also good, just not nearly as good, but with other options, so, but, smaller discussion there. From the American side, there's not so much else to discuss. I mean, some people are beginning to use more smoke, which is great, but otherwise there's not much comment on it. A lot, Stuart rushes, captains, anti-tank guns. A lot of people seem to have slightly dropped off there in terms of, what they actually do, and that does to a certain extent make it some easier for some Axis players to deal with them, since they do tend to be a bit more frivolous. The early game advantage there does tend to make them a bit, more careless, and basically all of their sort of light equipment, including now the suit, of course, is more accessible early on. So there are some things there to sort of maybe consider. For the Soviets, I mean, again, the early buff really a lot for them. I mean, we have seen sort of more taking option. There's been a sort of boom in sort of vehicles, but it's sort of, to a certain extent for some players, these sort of shrunk in. There was a period where they sort of used more, but now it just sort of fallen into half-track rushes, T-70 rushes, and a lot of units seem to have suffered from what I call Fury syndrome. They suggest they play for the big tanks, ignore everything else they don't take up. And of course, I think that's partly because they can get away with it, just like it was, ages ago. Wehrmacht, for some reason, also fallen into a bit of a stupor, and hasn't really responded it properly. But of course, we'll get into that. But overall, I mean, it's nasty, but it's not overcome. But again, there are some things that are sort of leading to it. Versus the Oberkommando West, of course, things are a bit, less quite that easy due to the Puma and other things. But even there, we are seeing it somewhat. And of course, we'll have to see how it evolves. But that's not to, of course, always doing it, or everybody's doing it, Others are still taking up, going for sixes and so on. So, I mean, there are some, diversity, there's some interesting play, some choices going on. It's not just everybody just trying to sit around and playing for the heavy tanks, which is boring, but of course also not the best choice every single time. There was also a brief, surge of sniper builds, but that seems to sort of vanish back. Most players seem to move towards the support company. Of course, it's never quite, as monolithic as that. In terms of doctrinal uses, though, again, some more spread now. So the sort of one more room, so that's nice to see as well. But again, shock rifle still stands strong. Guards motor, slight surge. Then seems to sort of vanish into the shadows again to a certain extent. At least, not quite as standing out as much. There's some fun thoughts there, which certainly seem to indicate maybe guard motor, at least for certain, for the time being, has been broken as one of the more popular. Partly because, again, now you actually have to take up to get the T-35s. So, some thoughts there. For the semi-auto gun, but, I think it's to some extent because they've partly got a bit too easy when dealing with the Wehrmacht again, partly due to how the Wehrmacht is playing, but, we're not seeing as much varied play from them as we possibly could. I mean, the A half-track is very dominant, particularly for its cost and how quick you can get it. It can deal with most of the Wehrmacht's-like vehicles. Even the Oberkommando West has to be careful, but again, quite there, it doesn't quite have the sort of same supreme reign over the battlefield. So not really so much to cover. Then again, with the Wehrmacht, usually, their things get interesting, but here they have sort of suffered from the latest patch. Their early game, this is the sort of tier 2 play. While everybody sort of got improved there, the Wehrmacht, while it did get the 222 without needing the upgrade, problem is it can't really respond to the A half-track, T-70s, and the Stuart, which can more or less arrive at the same time as it. And problem is it doesn't really excel at anything. Sure, it's cheaper than them. The problem is, if you were to sort of get the same amount of scout cars, like a T-70 or a Stuart, you'd probably still end up losing. Plus, you'd have to expend a lot more manpower. And of course, that's the problem as the Wehrmacht. You don't quite have that kind of manpower because, again, you have smaller squads who cost more and bleed more, say with Stuarts and T-70s out on the field. Plus, if you're dealing with a Stuart, you also got the Captain bazookas, which also keeps your 222 is a bit in check there, so something's not quite adding up there. 222 needs a bit more work in some direction. They need to add, I don't know, a Pack 40 upgrade for the 251 half track. Panzer Grenadier has seen more use. That's going up. That's good. That's good. Some Wehrmacht players has fallen back towards Grenadier spam. MD42 surprising again, despite all the stuff they got, but it might have been the cost increase. A slightly fallen a bit out of favour. They're still using this again, you know, a bit wary there. It's not just, you know, all blank, though. Again, I'm seeing more players going for close air support and just Grenadier spam. So again, you know, something's a bit off there. Perhaps players just aren't feeling again they can compete with the regular, you know, lighter tier 1 to tier 2. And certainly one thing that's happened, which I'm actually rather sad to see, you know, was the tier 1 to tier 3. I mean, Relic's decision for making the teching as it did was ostensibly, you know, to make it, oh right, easier to skip tiers. The problem with it is they've actually made it worse, in particular again since they cannot afford at the moment, almost, or at least it's very difficult, to skip tier 2 and rush for tier 3. I've seen a few players do it, and even then it's pretty risky. I mean, deeply risky. There's not even any safe zone because your opponent can get a T-70 out in the meanwhile. So, you know, again, I'd say something might have gone slightly awry there. Maybe the Wehrmacht tier 3 needs to be a bit cheaper. It's not exactly, again, like previously was easy to do it, and now it's certainly not more easy. It's not like it's vastly more difficult, but even that slight price increase seems to really sort of put a lot of people off it, or even just going for tier 3 in general. I mean, we still also see tier 4, so that's nice, but, you know, something's not quite up. The Stu changed here, he hasn't seen any sort of great effect. I mean, sure, more people are using it, but in the end, not really more than previously. I mean, essentially, it hasn't really fixed one of the big issues of the Stu, which again is it can't really take a hit. And certainly its price increase, you know, again, with yours then considered increased to tier 3, maybe that was a bit the wrong direction. Maybe it should have been the older, cheaper thing, on top of the other, you know, more expensive stuff, but of course that's just a consideration. So I mean, in Wehrmacht is following a bit more the awkward position. It's not bad, but it certainly seems like certain options has been made rather unviable, untenable against the sort of more rapid aggression of the Allies. And certainly some changes I think are necessary around the tier 2 level to sort of make it work there, or maybe somehow make tier 3 a bit more accessible somehow. Otherwise, there's definitely going to think some further problems as the game approaches. Of course, who knows, that might come with the British expansion. Of course, there'll probably be a patch, but we don't know. Oberkommandowests, still largely false Grenadier spam. Not a lot of people, you know, bother with, you know, anything else. Kugelwagens don't really see much action. Storm Pioneer, still not a lot of action because, again, despite the changes there to them, the problem is still the veterans are up incredibly slowly, and they're still expensive, and they still take too long to train. Something needs to give them. I certainly suggest it's the experience it needs to give to sort of make them at least decently viable. Puma seems to be a bit of resurging because they're sort of what they have to sort of deal with it. Things for Kednev, such not quite the best option there, but otherwise it's still infantry spam. I definitely think need to sort of overhaul the full guns. At least, you know, do something sort of make fit, because we, you know, got this faction profile, great, but, you know, the Oberkommando doesn't fit it at all. If they want something early game and aggressive, I can easily give them that. I mean, make the Volksgunners A, more expensive, but also B, have them do more damage, C, make them take more damage, you know, make them sort of more fanatical German infantry, last steps of the war there, and, you know, have them more output, be more aggressive, but in longer run, certainly also in more, you know, grindy engagements, they'll lose up because there's simply more easy targets. I think that could, you know, give them more of a boost, and also make the Volksgunners less of, you know, just spam option, because you're going to get yourself bled out a lot faster. But the Kugelwagen could also do with something, you know. Part of me would like to see maybe just being able to transport vehicle with an MD upgrade. I think that would make it more useful. Also, again, play into the sort of early mobility aggressiveness of the Oberkommandos it's supposed to have. Panther 4 sees some work there, but even then, Schwerpanzer Quarters hasn't seen a huge surge. Obersoldaten could maybe do with a cost decrease because, you know, it's a bit, you know, more wishy-washy as to how many you see them, certainly in 1 versus 1s. You know, there are some oddities there, but overall the Oberkommando still needs a large overhaul, and the Jagdpanzer also needs something else. Just give it a bloody machine gun upgrade so you can at least deal with infantry that way, I would say. Beyond that, I don't think there's so much else. It's a bit harder to say, in particular, again, you know, with the Brits coming you know, maybe there's some, you know, gaps there that's going to be filled in. It's a bit more tricky for me to say that, but I definitely think some earlier things they needed for the Wehrmacht and the Oberkommando West, of course, not too much, but again, you know, if they are, again, it should be something with greater trade-offs, again, like, say, a greater manpower bleed on the Oberkommando West, because, again, that's all floating, so, again, you know, have them have more gains, but also a larger bleed that way, make them lose a lot more Volksgrenadiers, but, of course, also have more effect for it. Plus, of course, also make the Sturm Pioneers a bit more bloody worth it as well in the longer run. I mean, you can usually end up having them less than half an hour into the game, and that's the case, most people aren't going to bother with them. It's a little detail thing. And for the Allies, it's harder to say. I think it just impacts more the Axis being able to challenge them again. I think that's sort of where things have gone slightly askew in the Soviet Wehrmacht dynamic. Again, so it's getting a bit easier with it again due to the stronger Tier 2. And again, aren't being sort of severely challenged. But of course, it's a bit hard to sort of fully say there. But I think that sort of rather covers it here for August. And of course, next month, in fact next week, we'll have the Brits out, and that's certainly where things will get interesting. Hopefully there'll be some changes in terms of balance to the other factions, and of course, let's hope for that. So thank you all, hope you enjoyed this, hope you learned some things, and hopefully you're also a bit ready for the British coming out. And of course, look forward to some videos there from me, some Propagandacast there, and a review video sort of detailing, if you should get them, what the strengths and weaknesses are. So, cheers, and see you all another time. Bye!